Guys, and welcome. So we are live and I'm super excited to be here with you today. And today what I'm going to be teaching you and we're going to be going over and learning is how to make old-fashioned saltwater brine, aka fermented pickles, like your great-grandmother used to make, the pioneers used to do. It's one of the oldest forms of food preservation that we have. So I'm super excited to walk you through that process and to share that with you today. So my name is Melissa K. Norris. I am the author of the Made From Scratch Life, the blogger at melissaknorris.com, and the Pioneering Today podcast. So I love sharing and learning and teaching old-fashioned things that we can now use in our modern lives, and fermented saltwater brine pickles are one of those things. So many of us probably, and if you haven't, you've probably heard tale, but many of us remember going to our grandmother's house, perhaps your great-grandmother's house, or perhaps an older relative, and they would have crocks like this one here, and they would have their pickled food in it. So sometimes it was barrels, like if we're going way far back into the pioneer days, a lot of times it would be barrels. If any of you have read the Laura Ingalls Wilder books and went through there, then you remember them talking about when they would go to the general store that there would be barrels of pickles and that they would get their pickles in those barrels. So those kinds of pickles that we're referring to from way back when, they aren't what many of us, what we know now as mainstream America is pickles, and what most of us have had are pickles, which is vegetables that have been pickled with vinegar. So most of us are really familiar with, we've either made pickles that we've done with vinegar or the ones that we buy off the store shelf. Those are a vinegar pickle. So the vinegar is what gives it the sour taste and what acidifies it so that it has that shelf-stable, long shelf life, provided that it has been canned, of course, and processed correctly. But traditionally, your pickled foods were not done with vinegar. They were done with a saltwater brine, which is what this kind of pickle is done here. Because the form of pickling with saltwater, which is actually a fermented food, but you make a saltwater brine, that's how we have had our food has been preserved for thousands upon thousands of years. But it's one of those things that a lot of us, if you didn't have a home that was already doing it and you didn't grow up in it, you may have never even tasted a true fermented pickle, or you're not sure how to do it, or you remember, like I said, your grandma or your great-grandma doing it, but you might not actually know how to do it. And so that's where we are going to step in today. So some of the benefits of doing the brine pickles, of course, is it extends the shelf life of the food. Now, a saltwater brine or a fermented pickle is not something that when it's finished that you will just put on. It's not shelf stable in it that form. So you won't just put it on the pantry shelf like you would your regular canned jars. So, hi Cindy, I'm so glad that you could join us. So with this, what it does is you take your raw vegetables. So this is going to be your raw vegetables. A lot of people, of course, think of pickles, we think of cucumbers, but you can pickle anything. So we've got beets. Most people are familiar with saltwater, what we'd call a saltwater brine, in the form of sauerkraut. That's a fermented food when it's done in a traditional way. So kimchi, depending upon the different cultures. Hey Autumn, I'm super excited you could catch me too. So what we're going to do is you're going to take the raw vegetable, because think about it, when you pick, like, say, green beans or cucumbers and that kind of thing, and you pick it out of the garden, your vegetables, or you bring it home if you're getting it at a farmer's market or even the grocery store, and you put it in the fridge, its shelf life in the fridge is anywhere from a few days, depending upon how fresh it was when you got it, to up to maybe a couple weeks max, especially with things like cucumbers and green beans. They don't have that long of a shelf life, even in the refrigerator. But when you do a saltwater brine pickle or a fermented food, it takes the shelf life in the fridge from maybe a few days to max of a couple weeks, and it puts it for months. So it extends it for months, which is really awesome for those of us who don't want to waste our food and we want to be able to preserve it to eat it longer. So that is what we're going to do today with the saltwater pickles. So what you do is you're making a saltwater brine, and then you're putting the raw vegetables in there. Yes, I know, you hate it when you go to the drawer and you open it, or in the back of the fridge, because we all have that happening to us, right? And then you see where it's like molded and broken down, and then you've wasted and lost all of that fresh produce, which drives me crazy. I hate to throw away food, right? It's like throwing away money. So instead, we're going to do some fermenting. So you're going to make your brine, And when you make your brine, it's really important for the quality of the ingredients, because the quality of the ingredients of anything that we're putting in determines the quality that we get off the end, on the end product. So you want to make sure that you're getting the vegetables at the freshest as you can. So preferably right after we pick them. I mean, it would be great in a perfect world if we were picking them straight from our garden. But even if you're getting them from the store, or like I said, you're purchasing them from a local farmer, farmer's market, that kind of a thing, you want to get the freshest that you can. So we don't want to use anything that's already got some soft spots or soiled spots on it. And for me, I prefer to do organic when possible, especially on, we all, that Dirty Dozen list where it shows the top 12 crops that are sprayed the most heavily with pesticides. Those are ones, if I'm not growing them myself, that I make sure that I get organically. That's totally up to you, but that's the way that we roll. So like I said, fresh as possible when we're putting them into the fermenting process. Now, with your water, to help, because this is a live culture, so it's a live being, so to speak. Don't get weird on me, but it's a living food. So the water that we use best is going to be either tap water that has been filtered, especially if you're on a city water system that has chlorine in it. You can use bottled distilled water, bottled spring water. Those things are fine. We just don't really want to have the chlorine in there. So filtered is best, so you can purchase, like I said, bottled water. And we are on our own private well. So if you have really hard well water, then sometimes if it's really hard water, it will affect the culture negatively and it won't do as well. However, I have been doing saltwater brine pickles for 2 or 3 years now. I can't remember how far back, but at least that. And our well water, it's a little bit hard and it's been just fine. So this that I've used here and all my stuff has just been our well water. So just a caveat there, if you are on city water or water that is treated with chlorine and that kind of thing, you're going to want to check your water. So the next thing that we've got, obviously, in these 2 ingredients is our salt. So your salt is important, the salt that you decide to use in your ferment. So this is the salt that I have been using, and this is called Celtic sea salt, and it's gray. So when you're using salt, you want to make sure that when you look at the ingredients on the back, that it's just sea salt, that there are no additives in it. We don't want any of the additives in there. So you don't actually want to use, sea salt is best, like I said, without additives. This is one of the times where you don't want to use table salt. You don't want to use canning salt. You want to use a sea salt. And the reason for that, especially this one, this is the gray sea salt. So I don't know if you can see it in there, but it's gray. So with the gray sea salt, it actually has more minerals and beneficial things in it. It hasn't been filtered and processed out. And that's good because not only is it good for our bodies to have more of the minerals in there, but it's also beneficial to the bacteria that we want to be growing in this saltwater brine that actually does the whole fermenting process for us. So I wanted to give you that caveat. Now, the ratio of when you are making your saltwater brine is you're going to take 2 tablespoons of the sea salt here to 4 cups or 1 quart of water, and you're just going to stir it in. Room temperature is fine. You don't want it extremely cold, and it's a little bit harder for the salt to dissolve, but you don't want it hot, because if it's hot, then the live bacteria, the microbes, don't grow if it's like boiling. So room temperature is best. Just get it as close as you can. You're going to stir and dissolve that in. So that's the ratio. If you have a huge crock like this one back here that you're doing, obviously then you're just going to double or triple that. For a half gallon, which is what I have got going right here, then I ended up doing 1.5 of those batches. So it was 1.5 quarts of water of the salt brine to make this one up here. So then what you do is you always want to start with a clean jar or crock, and either a fermenting crock or a glass jar is best. So you can use any kind of mineral salt as long as it doesn't have any additives in it. So you're going to want to look at the back of it on the ingredients and see what's in it. The gray mineral salt actually has the most minerals in it, or excuse me, the gray sea salt has the most minerals in it, and so that's why it's kind of the preferred for doing the ferment. But I have used other salts in the past. I had a different sea salt. I can't remember which brand it was now that I used last year, and I had success with that as well. But this is just like the best, so that you have the best success, because when you're starting to do the fermenting of the saltwater brines, if you've never done it before, you want to have success on that very first go round, or you can get kind of discouraged if it doesn't turn out. So this is just to set you up for the best success, is to use these ingredients. So the next thing that we're going to do is you're going to pack your jar with the food, whatever it is you're deciding to ferment. Now for me, I kind of love the combination of garlic and dill, especially when we're doing a pickled thing. So I put in some peeled cloves of garlic, you can see here on the bottom, and then I had fresh dill from the garden, and I actually put that on top, and then these are green beans. So we just went ahead and put the green beans all in the jar. And depending upon the size of the jar, you're just going to pack it with the solids, with the foods, up to about 2 inches from the top of the jar. So in canning lingo, that is headspace. So headspace is from the top of the food or the contents inside of a jar to the very top of it. So we're going to pack it to a 2-inch headspace. Then you're going to take your saltwater brine, where you've mixed the salt into the water, stirred it so that the salt is completely dissolved, and you're going to pour it on top to a 1-inch headspace. So we want to make sure that we don't have it packed so tight that the liquid isn't going all the way around the food. So then after you do that, you're going to want to use a weight. And the reason that we want to use a weight of some kind is because as these cultures are becoming active, they will produce little gases. And it can cause the food to rise up and go above the surface of the water. And if it goes above the surface of the water or the brine, then it can start to mold. And we don't want mold in there. The mold will take over and then we can't eat it. Then we have to toss it out, right? So what you can do, there's a couple different options. You can use anything that is clean and is heavy enough to keep the food submerged beneath the brine and that will fit into the top of your jar. So a lot of times there's like glass fermenting weights people will use. You can get kits, or if you're using a wide mouth jar, you know, the little tiny glass jars, especially for those of us who have ever purchased store-bought baby food, if you have a little glass jar like that, you probably could even use a small shot glass, to tell you the truth now that I'm thinking about it. You're going to put that at the top, and then you will put the water inside of it and push it down, and that keeps your contents down in there. Now, this is a fermenting lid. There's a little hole with a gasket in there, and then this part that comes up on top, what this does is you put a little bit of the water and the brine in here, and this helps keep oxygen out, because we actually don't want oxygen in the jar at this time. So this keeps the oxygen out, because oxygen, if it's in there, then mold and other non-beneficial, the bad bacteria that we don't want to be growing in the jar, it can get in there and yeast can become contaminated. So we want to try to keep it airtight, which is the purpose of this. The other purpose of this is, as you can see, there's little holes up here, because as the live cultures are living and growing, they produce little gases, which is a good thing, and you want to see the presence of bubbles. That's one of the telltale signs to look for, to know that your saltwater pickles are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. But when they produce the gases, this allows the gases to come up and go out of the jar without the oxygen getting in. Now, if you don't have this, you can still try it, and then you can also just burp the jar, which is just letting the lid up a little bit if you don't have this system. It's fairly inexpensive, and I will link to it when I'm done with this live presentation and in the show notes. This is actually already a blog post, so if you want to go and see written in all the links, you can do that. It's at melissaknorris.com/SW for saltwater, SW pickle. So the pickler set that I am using now, this one right here, I got it off of Amazon. I actually can't remember the name brand, but it is in the notes, and then I will provide the links for that as well. I've also used another brand because I've got several different lids going at different times. It's called the Perfect Pickler, and I believe that was from culturesfromhealth.com. So I can put all of these resources for you in the show notes, and we can link back to them again. So you are going to set this down on there after you've packed your jar with your saltwater brine and put your weight in there, and you're going to let it sit out of direct sunlight and not near appliances that get hot. So your best temperature range is between 60 degrees Fahrenheit and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So we don't want it too hot, but we don't want it too cold. Warm is best. I feel like Goldilocks from Three Bears, but we don't want it too hot, we don't want it too cold, right in the middle. So, and then what you're going to let it do is you're going to let it sit. And within 24 to 48 hours, you will usually start to see little bubbles on the surface, which is good. It means that it's active, and it will turn cloudy. So I don't know if you can see that the water, especially down here on the bottom, this brine, this saltwater brine, is turned cloudy. So the cold won't necessarily kill it, but the cold, if it's too cold, the cold is not going to, the bacteria, that live bacteria, the heat helps it grow. So if it's too cold, it slows it down, and it's going to slow it down to the point that it's not going to actually be fermenting actively enough for it to do its job. So after we've done this active ferment, which is kind of like the first ferment as far as fermenting lingo goes, then you're going to move it to the refrigerator. But we have to keep it warm first, and a lot of times if it's too cold, the live lactic acid microbes just don't grow, and we need them to grow and so that it can actually preserve. And what it does is it starts to, in a good way, is it starts to pre-digest these, and that's what helps keep it in this state for a long time. It helps preserve it, and that's what makes it so beneficial to our digestive tract. Because actually, scientists, they've just been doing studies fairly recently that the majority of our immune system, between 70 and 80%, they think now, of our immune system is actually in our gut. And the presence, you've probably been hearing, there's tons of stuff about probiotics, how good probiotics are for us. And there's tons of stuff on the market now where they want you to buy these expensive live probiotics in pill form. This is what that is, guys. This is like your free probiotics, just as God made them, right? So what I absolutely love about this. So it's very beneficial to your health when you are consuming probiotics, because it is beneficial to the flora in your guts. So after it has went through about 4 days, you're going to check it, and it should start to smell not bad, like not a rotten smell, but it's going to start to smell sort of tangy. So after 4 days, you're going to want to check it, and I'm actually going to check mine right now and remove this. So occasionally you will get on the very top, this has been fermenting since Sunday. It's been going for about 4 days. And so sometimes you may start to get a little bit, I don't know if you can see it without me spilling this, you might start to get a little bit of a film on top. If that happens, just skim it off and discard that part, and then just let it continue to ferment. So after you hit the 4-day point, you're going to test it. You're going to taste test it and see if it tastes sour enough to you. So I'm actually going to taste test one of these beans. And the other sign that it's actually working is when you first put your vegetables in there, they're going to look like they're raw. The color is very vibrant. These were a bright green bean. And especially this is true with cucumber pickles as well. As that live bacteria starts to ferment and do its thing, then it's going to change from that bright green color to a more traditional pickle color, almost looking like it's been cooked, but it's still raw. So this is a green bean piece. That's really good. Actually, I think I'm going to let them go 1 more day. So you kind of go by a taste. 4 days is usually the minimum, and then you can let them go up to about 10 days. Just taste test them for the profile. We want it to be, it's not going to be exactly like a vinegar pickle, if that's what you're used to. But it should have that sour, almost vinegary type taste. So if it's not quite tangy enough for you, then let it ferment for a few more days. So I just go by how strong of a flavor that I want it to have as far as tanginess. Once it's reached that point, then you're going to put it in the refrigerator. And a fermented pickle will stay in the refrigerator when it needs to be 40 degrees or lower. So if you have a garage, if you have a root cellar, if you have some type of cold storage like the pioneers of old did, that stays 40 degrees or lower, you don't want it to actually freeze. But 40 degrees or lower, like your refrigerator does, then it will stay in this form, in these pickled forms, for months, you guys. For months in your fridge, you will have these raw pickles, and they will stay good. It's not going to mold like your regular green beans would, which is pretty amazing. So when you get to the point that it's fermented enough and it's reached that flavor that you want, and you go to put it in the fridge, you'll actually remove this lid, because we don't want it to be air escaping out and then air getting in when it's in the refrigerator. So you'll remove this lid, and then you can just do your next fermenting project. And what you'll do is you'll just put on a regular 2-piece canning lid. So the metal canning lids where you've got the metal lid and the band, you'll just put that on there and put it in the fridge, because that's going to help keep it airtight in the fridge, and will also keep it so that you don't have, you know, other food spores and things going on in the fridge that would contaminate it. So then you're just going to put it in the fridge, and then you just pull it out and eat it at will and enjoy it, but it will stay, which is why I tend to do mine in these bigger jars here, because it's going to stay in the fridge for a couple of months and I want to get a lot done at one time. So yeah, it extends the shelf life for about 2 months, plus you're getting all of that beneficial awesomeness, and it allows you to preserve your food without, which I do love my canning. Like, I feel like I'm cheating on my canner right now telling you guys this, but you can make pickles without having to heat up the kitchen, without using the vinegar, and without having to can it. I actually employ both in my home though, because I do not have enough refrigerator space to do all of my pickles, so I ferment the ones that I can and I've got room for, and then I can the traditional way with the vinegar and stuff that most of us are used to with pickles, so then I've got those pickles that are lining up the shelves. So this is a half-gallon jar that I've got going right here, but you can ferment in any size that you want. So with the mason jars, you could do, if all you had enough was enough produce, or you just wanted to do a small run, kind of see how it went, then you can do a pint, you can do a quart, you can do these half gallons like I've got here, or you will a lot of times see, traditionally wise, you will probably, these fermenting crocks, and these come in different sizes as well. But I'm going to give you a couple caveats when you're using these crocks. That when you just have the lid, like this lid right here that comes with this crock, it's not airtight. So when you're doing your ferments in here, I tried to do a full crock full of these beans last year actually in this, and I had 2 failed batches, which is why I'm sharing you with this, because I don't want you to have any failed batches and I want you to have as much success as possible. Because it wasn't airtight, especially with the green beans. And if your green beans are snap beans or they're mature, then they're one of the few things that you're actually going to blanch for just a couple of minutes before you put them in your saltwater brine and start them to be fermenting. So these I did blanch because they were a snap bean for 2 minutes, and then put them in here to start the fermenting process. So just that one caveat there. When I tried to do them in here, I got a lot of mold, I got a lot of contamination, and I ended up having to throw away both the crockfuls that I tried to do in here because I'm just determined that it was going to work. And so I tried it for the second time and had the same results. So that's why I'm sharing this with you. However, with the crock, and I did put saran wrap on top to kind of try and keep it sealed, it just did not work, which is why I really do recommend using these lids like this. And like I said in the show notes, I will link to some of those for you so you can check out a couple different kinds for your success when you're doing your ferments. Now, though, sauerkraut and kimchi worked great for me without having this airlock system here. So I think the cabbage might be a little bit more friendlier and doesn't grow the bacteria as easily, or the mold. At least that was my experience. So I've done sauerkraut in here, and that worked positively wonderful. We did multiple batches of kimchi, and that worked too. So it just kind of depends on what you want to start out with your fermenting wise onto which route you're going to take. So if you're just beginning and you don't have one of these crocks, I would just, because the crocks, unless you can find them like at the Goodwill or a thrift store or garage sale, which is awesome. I love it when I can find that kind of stuff there. Then a mason jar with this lid system is actually going to be much cheaper for you to use than going with this route. And you can do all kinds of fermented foods, you guys. So one of the things is I have, I'm not from the South, I'm actually from Washington State in the Pacific Northwest, but my family hails from the southern states. So all you East Coast, North Carolina peeps, Appalachians, I'm waving and saying hello. So chow chow is a corn relish, and traditionally it was fermented, and it was something that they would eat all year long. And fermented chow chow is so good. My neighbor makes some, and when we're lucky, she gifts us some. And so that's next up on my list that I want to do at home. But that is traditionally done. The corn is done in a crock as well, and that tends to work pretty well in the crock. She does hers up in the crock. She does big crocks at once for the whole year. So it just kind of depends on what it is you want to ferment. But like the regular pickles, I did cucumber pickles, multiple batches in the mason jar this year, and I had a lot of good success using this system. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. I'm super excited for you to try the saltwater. And if you want to have all of the steps written out for you, including the ratios of the salt to the water to make these yourself, you can go to melissaknorris.com/swpickle, and all of those resources are there for you. And then this will be shortly up as well as the Pioneering Today podcast. And we also recently just did an episode on making, which is a form of fermentation as well, raw apple cider vinegar at home. So you can go and catch that at melissaknorris.com. Click on the podcast button and you can go and grab that video and those resources as well. So I can't wait to hear what you guys are going to be doing with saltwater pickles and brines and fermenting. I hope that you share your pictures with me. And I would love to see it in the comments beneath this, what it is you plan on doing first for your fermentation. And then plan on joining me back here next Tuesday as we'll have our next live teaching video. So thank you guys so much and have a fabulous day.